makes the catch. That is his strength.
Dives towards the pylon.
Fitz is loose 40. Goodbye! Larry Fitzgerald, touchdown!
Larry Fitzgerald's career unfolded in a league that increasingly rewarded volume over substance. As attention became currency and personality became leverage, greatness learned how to announce itself loudly. Fitzgerald moved in the opposite direction. He never chased relevance, yet relevance followed him for nearly 2 decades. His career wasn't defined by moments designed to be remembered. It was defined by habits designed to be repeated. While others used noise to amplify impact, Fitzgerald allowed silence to do the work. That restraint didn't limit his legacy, it preserved it. To understand his greatness, you don't start with highlights or headlines. You start by understanding what happens when excellence refuses to perform for attention. Larry Fitzgerald never chased the spotlight, yet it continued to find him. In an era when wide receivers built brands alongside route trees, he chose restraint. There were no celebrations crafted for cameras, no public frustration aired for leverage, no effort to shape the narrative around himself. Fitzgerald let silence do the work. That choice forced the league to evaluate greatness without theatrics. There were no distractions to lean on, only production. Catches arrived without spectacle. Leadership surfaced without speeches. His influence wasn't announced, it was felt. Teammates followed him not because he demanded attention, but because his standard never wavered. In a sport increasingly driven by personality and presentation, Fitzgerald's restraint became its own presence. He didn't disappear into the background, he stood apart from it. The absence of noise sharpened focus on the work itself, preparation, consistency, accountability. That quiet approach didn't make him forgettable. It made him undeniable. With nothing to amplify or defend, his career was judged on substance alone. And when the noise faded, what remained was clarity, excellence that needed no performance beyond the game itself. Defenses never game planned for surprises when facing Larry Fitzgerald, they prepared for inevitability. Year after year, regardless of quarterback changes or shifting offensive schemes, his presence stabilized the entire structure of the offense. Coaches knew what was coming. Defensive backs knew what was coming. And still, it arrived. Consistency at that level becomes disruptive. It strips defenses of hope that chaos, time, or circumstance will solve the problem. There was no waiting for decline, no relying on confusion. Fitzgerald didn't win through unpredictability or gimmicks. He won by executing excellence repeatedly until coverage bent in his direction. His routes forced safety help. His hands demanded bracket coverage. His reliability reshaped alignments before the snap was even taken. That influence rarely shows up in highlight reels, but it changes games. By being dependable to the point of inevitability, Fitzgerald became more threatening than Flash ever could. His greatness lived in repetition, the kind that wears opponents down mentally and tactically. And in a league that thrives on surprise, he proved that consistency, when absolute, can be the most dangerous weapon of all. Across his career, Larry Fitzgerald caught passes from more than a dozen quarterbacks, spanning Hall of Fame talent to short-term solutions passing through unstable seasons. Systems shifted, timing changed, continuity rarely existed, yet his production never collapsed. That reality quietly challenged one of the league's most accepted assumptions, that elite receivers require elite stability to remain elite. Fitzgerald didn't benefit from consistency, he became it. Young quarterbacks leaned on him because his routes were precise enough to erase hesitation. Veterans trusted him because throwing his way reduced risk. He simplified reads, stabilized progressions, and gave offenses a reliable answer when structure broke down. His impact went beyond targets and receptions. He absorbed uncertainty so others didn't have to. Where chaos might have fractured chemistry, Fitzgerald provided clarity. His preparation made timing flexible. His awareness compensated for inexperience. His hands forgave imperfect throws. In doing so, his greatness functioned independently of environment. He wasn't elevated by ideal conditions, he elevated the conditions themselves. That ability to transcend circumstance is rare, and it reframed how reliability, trust, and excellence at the position are understood. Fitzgerald wasn't just productive across eras of quarterbacks, he was the constant that made those eras survivable. Larry Fitzgerald finished his career with more tackles than dropped passes, a statistic that endures because it expresses something numbers rarely capture: reliability under pressure. It isn't trivia, it's symbolism. It reflects a career built on trust, precision, and accountability in the moments that decide games. His hands didn't simply catch footballs, they resolved uncertainty. On third downs, in the red zone, and during late-game drives, when hesitation fractures offenses and mistakes compound, throwing to Fitzgerald became the safest decision available. He reduced risk without reducing ambition. Defenses understood it. They shaded coverage, rolled safeties, and still watched the ball arrive where they expected it to go. Quarterbacks relied on it, not because it guaranteed explosion, but because it guaranteed control. He gave offenses permission to function under pressure. That trust became his defining currency. It didn't fluctuate with circumstance or age. It wasn't tied to scheme or quarterback pedigree. It was earned, reinforced, and sustained across 17 seasons. In a league obsessed with volatility, Fitzgerald's reliability became rare. And in the end, that consistency mattered as much as any accolade because it made uncertainty manageable and excellence repeatable. As speed inevitably declined, Larry Fitzgerald didn't resist reality. He mastered it. Instead of clinging to what time was taking, he leaned into what experience had given him. His move inside wasn't a concession, it was a calculated evolution. In the slot, he transformed leverage, body control, and spatial awareness into weapons more reliable than raw burst. There, Fitzgerald punished zone coverages with precision and intelligence. He understood spacing better than defenders understood assignments. Linebackers couldn't match his nuance. Safeties couldn't outthink his timing. He dictated matchups before the snap and resolved them after it, turning subtle advantages into consistent production. That transition extended his relevance well beyond the physical prime most receivers depend on. It reframed aging not as decline, but as refinement. While many players fade as athletic edges dull, Fitzgerald sharpened other tools: anticipation, positioning, and trust. Few receivers age gracefully. Fewer still age deliberately. Fitzgerald's later years weren't about surviving change, but about controlling it. He didn't outrun defenders anymore, he outmaneuvered them. And in doing so, he offered a blueprint for longevity built not on denial, but on intentional adaptation. Some leaders command rooms. Larry Fitzgerald steadied them. He didn't rely on speeches or volume to establish authority. His preparation made expectations unmistakable. Teammates didn't need reminders about standards. They watched how he worked and adjusted accordingly. His practice habits set the baseline. Effort was assumed. Accountability was automatic. Coaches trusted him to model professionalism without constant oversight. Knowing his presence reinforced structure more effectively than enforcement ever could. He led by eliminating excuses rather than addressing them. That kind of leadership rarely announces itself, but it reshapes cultures quietly. Over time, it becomes embedded in routines, behaviors, and assumptions. Players didn't follow Fitzgerald because he demanded it. They followed because his approach made everything around him function more smoothly. Eventually, Arizona stopped searching for an identity. Fitzgerald had already defined it: disciplined, resilient, and grounded in preparation. His leadership wasn't about visibility, it was about permanence. And in that quiet influence, he left behind something more enduring than wins or accolades. A culture that knew what it stood for because it had lived beside him. Defenders rarely talked trash around Larry Fitzgerald. Cornerbacks played him straight. Safeties resisted unnecessary risks. In football, respect often shows itself through caution, and Fitzgerald earned that response consistently. His presence alone altered how defenses behaved before the ball was ever snapped. Double teams arrived early in games, not as reactions, but as plans. Coverage shaded in his direction by default, forcing defensive coordinators to prioritize containment over disruption. The goal wasn't to eliminate him, it was to limit damage. That adjustment spoke louder than any statistic. When opponents change behavior pre-snap, dominance has already taken place. Fitzgerald didn't need deception or volatility to demand attention. His reliability forced defenders to abandon gambling instincts and play disciplined football. For nearly 2 decades, he created that effect. Defenses treated him not as a highlight risk, but as a structural problem that required constant mitigation. That level of respect doesn't come from isolated moments, it's earned through repetition, precision, and trust. Fitzgerald forced the league to adapt around him, and when that happens, greatness has already been established. In Super Bowl XLIII, Larry Fitzgerald delivered one of the most commanding wide receiver performances the championship stage has ever seen. He finished with 127 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, controlling the game in a way that felt complete and authoritative. Late in the fourth quarter, his long touchdown reception carried the weight of narrative fulfillment, as if years of loyalty and consistency were finally converging into one decisive moment. For a brief stretch, it felt final. earned, inevitable. When the ending shifted, the performance didn't diminish, it became suspended. What Fitzgerald did remained undeniable, yet the outcome refused to lock it into triumph. That contrast crystallized his entire career. Excellence without guarantee, execution without insurance. He met every demand the moment required. Preparation, composure, dominance, all present. The result simply failed to cooperate. And that tension lingered long after the game ended. Super Bowl XLIII didn't define Fitzgerald by what he lacked. It defined him by what he delivered when nothing else was promised. That unresolved balance, brilliance paired with uncertainty, followed him for the rest of his career, not as a flaw, but as a signature. A reminder that sometimes greatness does everything right and still lives without closure. Larry Fitzgerald's absence did something his presence never needed to. It clarified his value. When he stepped away, Arizona didn't just lose production, it lost structure. The numbers could be replaced in fragments, but the reliability could not. Young receivers struggled to replicate his precision. Timing slipped. Offensive rhythm fractured in subtle but persistent ways. What had once felt automatic now required effort. Third downs became less certain. Late-game possessions felt heavier. Without Fitzgerald absorbing pressure and simplifying decisions, the offense no longer had a built-in stabilizer. His impact, once assumed, became visible only in its absence. That revelation reshaped how his career was understood. Retirement didn't end his influence, it exposed it. It revealed how much of the offense had been quietly organized around his consistency, his awareness, and his trustworthiness. Some greatness announces itself loudly. Fitzgerald's revealed itself slowly, through what stopped working once he was gone. And in that silence, his true value became unmistakable. Because some legacies aren't fully appreciated in real time, they're understood only when stability disappears and everyone realizes what had been holding everything together all along. Larry Fitzgerald's career asks a question the league still struggles to answer. Can greatness exist without validation? His response was never loud, but it was unwavering. He showed up, he delivered, he endured. No drama, no shortcuts, no attempts to reinvent himself for attention or relevance. Just work, repeated at an elite level for nearly 2 decades. Fitzgerald didn't chase approval or wait for conditions to be perfect. He operated independent of praise, headlines, or outcomes. When teams changed, quarterbacks rotated, and expectations shifted, his standard remained untouched. That consistency became his statement. Over time, respect accumulated where applause usually fades. His career wasn't defined by moments engineered for memory, but by reliability that refused to erode. While others rose and fell with perception, Fitzgerald stayed anchored to preparation and execution. In the end, his legacy proved something enduring. Noise fades, narratives shift, validation expires, but consistency, when sustained long enough, settles into history. Fitzgerald didn't need the league to crown him in real time. His career earned something more permanent, unquestioned respect, preserved not by spectacle, but by steadiness. Larry Fitzgerald's legacy doesn't linger because it was debated, it lingers because it was dependable. Time didn't expose flaws in his career, it revealed how rare it was. In an era shaped by exits, reinvention, and constant self-promotion, Fitzgerald proved that consistency could still command respect without demanding it. His story doesn't end with celebration or regret, it ends with clarity. He didn't need validation to confirm greatness, and he didn't need noise to make history notice. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Where does Larry Fitzgerald rank among the greatest receivers the game has ever seen? And does the absence of a ring even matter anymore? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories where legacy is built quietly and remembered permanently, subscribe and stay with us. Some greatness doesn't echo, it settles.